All right, let's get to Hall of Fame induction. I'm going to admit I did not watch any of this. I was really busy on Sunday, but Helton, Maurer, Beltre, and Leland are your new members of the Hall of Fame. Do we agree with these four going in?
I think for the group you had,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, I would you. Is there one you're particularly looking to argue against?
You're still stuck on Maurer, aren't you?
I mean, sort of, just because like the numbers aren't particularly there. Was he the best catcher of that time and that like, yeah, for sure. Like I would take Joe Mauer on my team 100 times out of 100.
Well, so I think the whole kind of answered your question, right?
Well, right. So like, but you look at Hall of Fame and you look at the accumulation of stats, you're like, well, why is this guy in? Like if I'm 50 years younger, right, and I go to the Hall of Fame in 2065 and I'm looking at his plaque, I'm like, why is this dude in the Hall of Fame? Like, you know,
I get
like
it. I think
know
that's
because
a dangerous
we saw
game to play. I think that's a dangerous game to play.
And I agree,
but we get into this every fucking year.
And we're getting into it too.
Here we go. Like I feel like I'm gonna be like word for word the same shit I said last year. But
it's the third annual Hall of Fame bubble talk. Let's go.
I think the problem that we have in baseball, the writers have done it. So it's like it's like the blueprint to get into the Hall of Fame is there. It's all about numbers. And I understand like there has to be some sort of like base. Like you have to have a base. But I think it should be more important. How do I want to say this? I think it should be more important that you are a player that when you played for your, I think there should be a minimum of like 10 years. I mean, you can't play for 3 years and be in the Hall of Fame, right? There should be like a minimum number. Like
it is.
I think 10 years is a good number.
It is 10.
Right? It is 10. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like that's a good number. For the 10 years plus that you played, if you were the guy that other teams, other managers, other coaches, other front office people were game planning against, the Twins are coming to town. How does Joe Mauer not beat us? Yeah. When we get on the base paths, we got to make it happen because Joe Mauer is going to throw us out. Like that's the guy. Then I think if you're that guy for 10 years, then you're a Hall of Famer. Like you're a Hall of Famer. I recognize that maybe the numbers offensively, let's say, don't stand up to other catchers that are in there. I get that. But like for the 10, 11, 12, 13 years that you played, you were the guy. I mean, what else do you want? You're the guy.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important for me. And I hate the way that they vote with these writers because how are you not biased? And they can say all they want that they're not biased. Like, how are you not biased? You like guys or you don't like guys. You're willing to cut guys some breaks and other guys you don't cut breaks for. It's just human nature. Yeah. I mean, if you talk to anybody that played against, coached against, managed against Joe Mauer, they'll all tell you the same thing. That guy was one of the best players in the league for the years that he played. To me, that's what makes it like a no doubter.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
yeah, so I mean, you look at Joe Mauer, and obviously it's hard to compare catchers over the years, but I'm going to use WAR. You're welcome. If you look at catchers by WAR, in career WAR, Joe Mauer is the 11th best catcher all time. And if you look at his WAR over his top 7 seasons, he's the 6th best catcher all time. So, and then for 5 years, he's the 7th best catcher all time. In his prime, he's in the top handful of catchers in the history of baseball. Did his career end early? Yes. Did it have to? No. He opted to retire. He could have kept playing, but he said, look, I'm going to go out when I can still do it. I'm not going to keep putting my body through this. I want to have a life outside of baseball. So he left. But in his prime, he's one of the top handful of catchers of all time. Body of work, he's outside of the top 10. Is that Hall of Fame worthy? I think we've talked about. Is it like blow you away Hall of Fame worthy? No. But like it's Hall of Fame worthy in the sense that those numbers are good enough to get in. And he was effectively the face of the game for so long. In his prime, he was the guy. His face was everywhere. Everybody knew him. Like, so to a generation, he is up there on the Mount Rushmore of players because he was that important to the game of baseball in the 2000s.
Yeah.
Which to me tells you more than what just a buffet of numbers can tell you.
So, yeah, were the stats good enough? Yeah. But when you layer on top of that he was the face of the game for a decade, yeah, I mean, you can't not put him in. that would be it would be silly. A guy who's that noteworthy and is that recognizable not being in the Hall would be a travesty.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I'm just thinking future fans, you go back. I mean, you think about like, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of guys in the obviously 30s and 40s that I know nothing about that are in the Hall. And I go back and read their plaque and I'm like, yeah, so, like, and nothing against them and what they did in their careers, but it's hard, right? Like, we've always said that we're small Hall guys, right? Like, you have to be the elite of the elite to get in. Like, I know we joke about the 1% of the 1%. Yeah, it would be a Hall of 2 players, but like at that point, Barry Bonds, Babe Ruth, bang, that's it. That's your Hall of Fame. But obviously, we're not going to do that. But like, we get into like the borderline talk. I understand there has to be a line, right? There has to be a line somewhere. And baseball has all those intricate parts and stats and the intangibles that are hard to measure on a plaque that you can only see if you watch the game and you follow the game. So like, there's guys that are in the Hall that I don't think should be, and there's guys that are out that I think should be in. But how do you draw that line?
Well, I think it's I don't think it's possible now. Like, I think baseball has made it an accomplishment of numbers. Like it's been turned into that. Like, it's been turned into the 3,000 hits, the 400 home runs, or the
500 home runs.
Yeah, thank you. Like the automatic, like, well, you get that number, you're automatically in the Hall of Fame. So it's been turned into that. So now instead of talking about like who was this player for the 12 years that they played, like, not just the numbers. Yes, the numbers are important, but like did they essentially change the way the game was played? Like, was this particular person like the focal point of every single opponent for the 12 years, 13, 14 years that they played? It becomes less about that and it becomes more of just like the numbers. And now what we're doing is we're now arguing not like who was this player like full scope wise. We're talking about, well, he didn't quite have 3,000 hits, but he did miss time here. And what would he have had? And now you're bumping him up. Well, he doesn't have 3,000 hits. He has, 2,600, but this guy that has 2,558 is in the Hall of Fame. So if this guy's in the Hall of Fame, shouldn't that guy be in the Hall of Fame? And now we're just doing that game. And it's like, neither one of those guys were focal points. Like, in my opinion, like, they can both fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, but this is what the writers have done in baseball, has made it an argument about like numbers and not full scope. Who was this player? And it just frustrates me every year. It frustrates me because to me, like, Joe Mauer, the guy that started this conversation, is an absolute no-brainer. Like, no-brainer.
Yeah, that's fair. So what do you think about Todd Helton then? Being in Colorado? Like, does that taint his Hall of Fame case at all?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I would die on the hill that Todd Helton's a Hall of Famer. Like, I think Todd Helton, outside of what the numbers are telling you, and I have no idea if the numbers are going to back this up, but I can tell you, for somebody who's watched a lot of baseball and like gone back and rewatched a lot of old baseball, like, Todd Helton was one of the guys.
Yep.
He was one of the guys for when he played. He was just it. Good teams, bad teams, mediocre teams, teams that went on runs and made the postseason, teams that flopped at the end of the season and didn't make the postseason when they should have. This guy was the guy.
On the road, I have his road stats right here. 287 batting average on the road, 142 home runs, 547 RBIs. So, I mean, his splits are there. I mean, 316 batting average, and ended with 369 home runs. So half of his home runs, more than half of his home runs were a little bit under. Half of his
40
home were on the road. So I mean, his splits are there. So it's not like he dominated Coors Field and then went on the road and laid an egg.
But so even if he did dominate Coors Field, do I think that helped him? Yes, but it doesn't. Like, how many inches does that add, so to speak? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, does it help a little bit? Sure. But like, you're still playing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ball games, and you still have to hit all those home runs. You still have to, and we're not just talking power numbers. Like, does the altitude help you hit 316, or are you just a really good goddamn baseball hitter to hit 316 for your career? Like, I mean, are you going to get a few? Sure, you're going to get a few. No question. But you could argue that about ballparks in general and not just altitude. You could argue that Fenway is as much of a home field advantage as Colorado for certain hitters. You're going to start taking away, you're going to start asterisking guys.
All right.
Because
I mean, we already
short
are,
course.
so why not?
But I'm just saying, like, that's a dangerous game to play. Like,
yeah.
All right. Can I run a scenario by you guys? Follow me here for a minute. Do we all agree David Ortiz is a Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you not?
Is that a serious question? Yeah.
Serious? Yeah. Do you believe that David Ortiz is a Hall of Famer?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
David Ortiz in his career, his WAR was 55. There's a player here whose career WAR was 58.
Mm-hmm.
In his best 7 years, this player was 39 versus Ortiz is 35. Best 5 years, 27 versus 25. Best 3 years, 21 versus 17. Can you guess the player I'm comparing him against?
Carlos Beltran.
John Olerud.
John Olerud.
John Olerud, on the balance, was a more valuable player than David Ortiz. Not a Hall of Famer. So now let's go down that path. So David Ortiz, career WAR 55. Helton's 61. Best 7 years, Ortiz was 35. Helton was 46.5. Best 5 years, Ortiz was 25. Helton was 37.4. Best 3 years, Ortiz was 17.4. Helton was 25. Helton was substantially more valuable a baseball player than David Ortiz was. Now, many reasons for that. He played good defense.
Right.
David Ortiz played no defense.
Olerud was one of the most dominant defensive first basemen of his time.
So John Olerud statistically is a more valuable player than David Ortiz, not a Hall of Famer. Todd Helton is substantially more valuable than David Ortiz. And so Todd Helton is the 15th rated first baseman of all time. Olerud's 20th, Ortiz is 25th. Ortiz got in the Hall of Fame instantly.
But here's what I'm talking about though. But I think this is a much better conversation than we've had the past 2 or 3 years. It's like, this is more substantial. It's not just me like yelling at the clouds. But I think this is exactly where my argument goes though. Because right now you're just yelling numbers, and the numbers are great, and the numbers back up certain things.
They do.
But let me ask you, when you hear John Olerud, now John Olerud, when he played was a little bit before my time, right? Like, I was really young when he retired. I mean, I've seen a bunch of clips and all that, but I wasn't like into baseball when John Olerud was like playing the gist of his career. Was John Olerud like the guy you game planned against? Was John Olerud? Did John? If he was, he was. I'm not saying
Olerud was.
Dude,
he was not.
He was flirting with
250 career home runs.
Doesn't matter about home runs, dude. He was flirting with 400 for 3/4 of the season.
He's a 295 career hitter. So Olerud was a high average, a little bit of pop guy.
The point that I'm trying to make is, regardless of what the WAR tells you, best 5 years, best 3 years, overall career, whatever, there is a reason that the American League and the National League right now have the designated hitter, and that reason is David Ortiz.
Correct.
That's David Ortiz changed baseball. If there was no David Ortiz doing what David Ortiz did in Boston for so long, you would still have the pitchers hitting in the National League. I have no doubt in my mind.
I agree.
That makes him a Hall of Famer.
So same argument with Joe Mauer. Joe Mauer is in the Hall of Fame because he was that guy. Ortiz,
that's what I'm saying.
Ortiz statistically was never the best guy out there, but he is
most clutch, maybe not the best.
Exactly.
But I mean, let's put it this way. That's another conversation we can have another time. I bet you it's a lot closer than you're making it out.
David Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame because of the impact he had in the window of time he had. He was one of the top 5 guys in baseball for 5 or 6 years, like, clearly. And then he was decent on the other ends, but he was like the guy for a number of years. His playoff performances were legendary. Like, he's in for that. The body of work, Todd Helton is substantially better. Olerud's better. But when you look at what they did in their prime and the impact they had on the game, and it goes back just like Mauer, how recognizable are you? How noteworthy are you? You don't put David Ortiz in the Hall of Fame, you lose your mind. But John Olerud doesn't go in, who was actually technically a more valuable player over the balance of his career. And even in his prime, he was more valuable because he did more things, but he didn't have the it's not a sexy pick. Ortiz was a headliner, and Olerud was a crazy good, solid baseball player.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would die on the hill of Ortiz. I think paring down David Ortiz to numbers, and that's what baseball is, and I get it. Like, I
Yep.
know people are going to come at my head for this, but it's a sport. It's a team sport. In
Mhm.
all team sports, it's more than just fucking stat sheet humpers. Like, it's more than just numbers. Like, it matter. Like, the type of teammate you were matters. The things you did in clutch moments matter. And
Yeah.
like, Ortiz changed baseball.
He did.
He changed baseball. National League has a designated hitter right now because of David Ortiz. And I think Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer. I
agree.
don't have issues with that. But I will put up a fight if somebody tries to tell me that that Todd Helton was just an overall better player because he had a better career batting average or a better career WAR. Like, he's going to have a better career WAR. This guy he won Gold Gloves. Like, it's
right.
And
he did everything. He did a lot of things.
He did everything. But if you tell me that I'm building a championship roster and I have an opportunity for David Ortiz or Todd Helton, sorry, Todd, it's not close.
Right. So that's my point. David Ortiz statistically is behind even John Olerud, but because of what he did and the impact he had on the game, it's a no-brainer. And
Yes.
I think Mauer falls in the same category. Do his stats jump off the page at you? No, but for 5 or 7 years, there wasn't a better catcher in baseball. Period. Yeah. And that's where if you look at this strictly based on the stats, you can argue this thing all kinds of directions. But you've got to take into context, the time they played, the impact they had, what they did, who they were, because it's not just a matter of dumping all the numbers in a spreadsheet and picking the best. Because you'd leave David Ortiz out, put John Olerud in, and think you did a good job.
Well, it's because that's what the stats would say, right? Tells you. Yeah, Excel tells you that, and it's just not the way it is.
Yeah, and John makes the point of he's one of the best all time in his position. Well, yeah, but he was a DH. Like, DH is a less valuable position overall when it comes to measuring WAR and stats, because they do one thing.
So let me ask you. We're going to switch real quick, just because we seem to be downplaying a position he played. Adam Vinatieri, Hall of Famer, NFL Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Kicker. He didn't do much. All he did was kick.
Yep.
And even towards the tail end of his career, he didn't even do kickoffs. Right. So it's like, but he was for a period of time, a decent period of time, was the best at what that position had to offer.
And the kicker's like the DH. You do one thing. Doesn't mean you're not a Hall of Famer. Doesn't mean you're not valuable. But you can't put Adam Vinatieri next to Tom Brady and say, well, they're both in the Hall of the same player. No, they're not.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
yes,
that's
all
I'm saying.
That. If that's what you're saying, yes, I agree.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying he's less valuable by being a DH. I'm just saying you can't, when you put a DH against a guy who is an elite first baseman and their numbers are the same, well, the first baseman gets the nod.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. No. Fair. I'm with you.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah, Vinatieri and Tom Brady are not the same. They might both be in the Hall of Fame.
No argument.
Or going in the Hall of Fame, but not the same.
Okay, good.
Well then.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. It's all good.
We need to come back to this in the off season and just do like all these different segments picking this apart.
Man, I love it. Drop their grenade and walk away and let you two go at it. Love it.